There comes a moment in every human life when the waves of trials rise higher than our strength, when escape feels like the only option, and when the heart whispers, it's over. But in those very moments, heaven is watching, testing what lies within the soul. The story of Hazrat Younas A.S. is not merely the story of a prophet swallowed by a whale. It is the story of every man and woman who has ever tried to run from the call of destiny. It's the story of divine discipline, unshakable faith, and miraculous mercy. If you ever felt forgotten by God, this story will show you that even in the darkest depths, you are seen, you are known, and you are loved. Hazrat Younas A.S. was chosen by Allah to deliver a message of truth to the people of Nineveh. They were proud, rebellious, and lost in sin. For years, he called them toward the worship of one God, but their hearts were hardened. Frustrated and weary, he walked away, not in disbelief, but in disappointment. He left the city before receiving permission from his Lord. And that one act of haste would lead him into the deepest test of his life. Because when you are chosen for a divine purpose, you cannot escape the calling. You can run from the world, but not from the will of Allah. As he sailed across the sea, a storm broke loose, violent, merciless, and unrelenting. The ship trembled as the crew realized the storm was not ordinary, it was divine. Someone on that vessel was being pursued by destiny. The decision was made to cast lots, and the name that fell was Younas. Without resistance, he surrendered himself to the raging waters. A man ready to face the consequence of his impatience. But the mercy of Allah does not abandon his servant even in correction. The sea swallowed him whole, not to destroy him, but to preserve him. And within that darkness, in the belly of the whale, began one of the most powerful prayers ever uttered by human lips. Imagine the silence of the ocean floor. No light, no sound, only isolation and the echo of your own heartbeat. That is where Hazrat Younas A.S. found himself alone with his Creator. No throne, no followers, no status, only repentance. And he spoke the words that changed everything. La ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen. There is no deity but you. Glory be to you. Indeed, I was among the wrongdoers. This wasn't a prayer for rescue. It was a prayer of realization. He didn't beg for deliverance. He confessed his error. And in that confession lay the secret of deliverance. Because Allah does not need perfection. He desires sincerity. This moment, this prayer, holds the power to transform any life at any time. Because every one of us has a whale, a place of darkness, isolation, or regret. We may not be swallowed by a creature of the sea, but we are often swallowed by our own mistakes, fears, or failures. The lesson of Hazrat Younas A.S. is not simply about what happened. It's about what happens inside you when you finally stop running from God and start returning to Him. If you've ever wondered why your life seems paused in pain, why your progress feels delayed, maybe your whale is not punishment. It's protection. It's a divine classroom where Allah teaches the soul humility, patience, and surrender. The world saw a prophet inside a whale, but heaven saw a man reborn in submission. Because true greatness is not found in escaping trials, but in enduring them with faith. When Hazrat Younas, Ace, emerged from the darkness, he was not the same man who went in. He was purified, humbled, and strengthened. Allah accepted his repentance, restored his mission, and blessed him with victory. His people, once rebellious, now believed. The same city he abandoned became the city he saved. That is what happens when God turns your failure into a testimony. This story forces us to ask, what is the whale that has swallowed us? What are we running from? Because running from God never leads to peace. It leads to storms. But returning to Him, even from the depth of darkness, leads to mercy. That's why this story matters today. Because in every generation, believers face the same choice. Flee from the divine call or fall before divine mercy. Hazrat Younas A.S. teaches us that you can fall, you can fail, you can even flee, but never think you've gone too far for God to find you. His mercy can reach you in the ocean's depth, in the prison of your thoughts, in the silence of your pain. That's why you must listen till the end. Because what you are about to hear isn't a tale from the past. It's the mirror of your own soul. Somewhere in this story you will see yourself, your storm, your struggle, your surrender. And when you do, you will realize that every dark night hides the dawn of mercy waiting to rise. So stay till the end, because this is not just a story of a prophet. It's the story of divine mercy chasing human weakness. It's the story that will remind you that no matter how deep you've fallen, there's always a prayer that can lift you higher than ever before. This is the story of Hazrat Younas A.S., the man who was swallowed by the sea, but saved by surrender. And if you let this message sink deep into your heart, you will discover that your own storms were never meant to drown you. They were meant to drive you back to God. Patience is one of the hardest tests a believer will ever face. It is not simply waiting. It is trusting even when the waiting makes no sense. It is holding faith when logic screams to give up. The life of Hazrat Younas A.S. stands as one of the most powerful demonstrations of what happens when divine patience is tested and when human impatience meets divine will. His story begins not with rebellion, but with sincerity. He was a prophet chosen by Allah, a man filled with purpose, conviction, and love for his people. Yet even the chosen can be tested. Even the faithful can grow weary. And even the patient can reach their breaking point. When Hazrat Younas A.S. was sent to the people of Nineveh, his mission was clear: to call them toward the worship of Allah alone, to turn them away from their sins and arrogance. But instead of welcoming the message, they mocked him, rejected him, and closed their hearts to the truth. Imagine calling people day after day, year after year, and watching them refuse to listen. Imagine seeing them laugh at the very words that could save their souls. That is where the true test of patience begins. Not in the waiting itself, but in continuing to do what's right when no one else seems to care. Every prophet faced rejection. But Younas A.S.'s test was different. His emotions, his exhaustion, and his longing for justice led him to a moment of haste. He left his people before receiving the command from Allah to do so. It wasn't defiance. It was despair. It was the cry of a heart that had given all it could and saw no change. Sometimes when we feel we've done everything right and nothing works, we start believing that walking away is the only answer. That is the point where human patience collapses and divine patience begins. When Hazrat Younas A.S. left his people, it was as if he stepped away from his mission, but he could not step away from the mercy of the one who sent him. He boarded a ship to escape the land that had broken his heart. But he could not escape the divine lesson written for him. The storm that rose upon the sea was not just a storm of nature. It was the storm of correction. It was a reminder that God does not abandon His chosen ones. He redirects them. The winds howled, the waves crashed, and every heart on that ship trembled with fear. They cast lots to find who had brought this divine storm upon them, and the lot fell on Younas. Without hesitation, he accepted it. That was the moment his soul began to understand the weight of divine patience. He was thrown into the roaring sea, not as punishment, but as purification. The whale that swallowed him did not come to destroy him. It came to protect him. Because when the world rejects you, the ocean becomes your refuge. And when the people abandon you, the Creator embraces you. Inside the darkness of the whale's belly, Hazrat Younas A.S. found something that the world could not give him: silence, solitude, and realization. It was there that divine patience unfolded in its most beautiful form. Allah did not abandon him in that darkness. He allowed him to rediscover faith in its purest form. Patience is not passive. It is not sitting still and doing nothing. Patience is the strength to keep believing when you see no results. It is the courage to stay when leaving feels easier. Inside that whale, Hazrat Younas A.S. could have despaired completely. He could have cursed his fate or questioned why this was happening. But instead, his heart softened. His words became a melody of repentance. La ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen. There is no deity but you. Glory be to you. Indeed, I was among the wrongdoers. This prayer is not just a confession. It's the language of surrender. It's the voice of a heart that finally stops resisting and starts trusting. And that's the essence of divine patience. Learning to trust the process of God, even when it feels painful. When Younas A.S. uttered those words, the ocean that once seemed endless became the cradle of mercy. The same creature that confined him became the guardian that kept him alive. The same moment that felt like punishment became the moment of transformation. How often do we, like Younas A.S., lose patience when our prayers seem unanswered? How often do we walk away from people, dreams, or duties because they seem too heavy to bear? We forget that sometimes Allah delays success, not to deny us, but to develop us. He tests our patience to stretch our faith. The delay is never denial. It's divine timing. When Hazrat Younas A.S. was inside the whale, his patience was not built in comfort, but in confinement. And that's how true faith is formed. Not when life is easy, but when every door closes, and only one remains, the door of Allah. Divine patience is not about waiting for a miracle. It's about becoming one. It's about trusting that even your lowest moment can be used for something higher. When Younas A.S. emerged from the darkness, he was not the same man who entered. He was purified by the patience of Allah. His people, who once rejected him, turned to faith. His mission, which seemed lost, became fulfilled. What seemed like failure became divine success. That is what happens when you learn to trust God's timing more than your emotions. So, if you find yourself in a storm, if life feels heavy and your prayers seem unanswered, remember Hazrat Younas A.S. Remember that the same God who delivered him can deliver you. The whale you fear may be the womb of your rebirth. The darkness you dread may be the place of your awakening. Patience is not weakness. It is power restrained by faith. It is believing that even when you cannot see the planner is perfect. Hazrat Younas A.S. story teaches us that impatience can lead us into storms, but divine mercy can still bring us out. It shows that even prophets were human, that even saints can stumble, but the difference lies in how they return. And when they return, Allah meets them not with wrath, but with love. Because His patience surpasses ours, His mercy overcomes our mistakes, and His plan always leads us back to Him. That is the power of divine patience. It does not end when you fail. It begins when you surrender. There is no force on earth more powerful than sincere repentance. It can erase years of sin in a single moment of truth. It can turn darkness into light, despair into hope, and punishment into mercy. The story of Hazrat Younas A.S. stands as an eternal symbol of this power. The power of turning back to Allah when the soul has wandered too far. His journey from the depths of the sea to the mercy of his Lord was not a tale of destruction, but of divine forgiveness that knows no limit. When Hazrat Younas A.S. found himself in the belly of the whale, he was stripped of everything. No companions, no freedom, no light, and no escape. The ocean around him was endless darkness, but within that darkness, something divine was happening. It was the moment when the veil of pride was lifted and the truth of surrender began. He realized that his departure from his people, though humanly justified by pain, was premature in divine wisdom. And in that moment of complete isolation, he discovered that the only direction left to turn was upward, to Allah. The power of repentance begins when the heart stops blaming others and starts acknowledging its own fault. Hazrat Younas A.S. didn't offer excuses, didn't justify his choices, and didn't complain. He simply said, La ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen. There is no deity but you. Glory be to you. Indeed, I was among the wrongdoers. That one sentence carried the weight of humility, honesty, and brokenness. It was not a plea for escape. It was a confession of reality. And that is what makes repentance so powerful. It opens the gates of mercy because it aligns the human heart with divine truth. When a servant truly repents, Allah doesn't just forgive, He restores. The whale that seemed like a prison became the very vessel that carried Younas, as safely through the sea. The ocean that seemed ready to swallow him became his sanctuary. The darkness that seemed unbearable became the womb of a new beginning. This is how Allah's mercy works. It transforms what was meant to destroy you into what will deliver you. It was not the strength of Younas that saved him. It was the sincerity of his repentance that moved the heart of his Creator. Repentance is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of spiritual intelligence. It means recognizing that you are not self-sufficient. That every breath, every success, every escape from danger is by the permission of Allah. And when that awareness fills your heart, you begin to see mercy even in moments of discipline. The whale, the sea, and the darkness were not punishments. They were instruments of purification. They were the divine classroom in which Younas, learned that no matter how far you've gone, one sincere prayer can bring you back. When he was delivered back to the shore, weak but alive, it was not merely survival, it was rebirth. Allah's mercy didn't just save his life, it reignited his purpose. His repentance was accepted, his mission was restored, and his people were guided. The same prophet who thought his message had failed became the reason an entire nation believed. That is the proof that repentance doesn't just change your condition. It changes your destiny. Every believer will stumble. But the difference between ruin and redemption is repentance. You may fall 1,000 times, but the mercy of Allah is greater than your failures. He is not waiting to punish you. He is waiting for you to return. The story of Hazrat Younas, teaches that no one is too lost, too broken, or too late to come back to Allah. The ocean of His mercy has no shore. The moment you say, "Oh my Lord, I was wrong," that moment the heavens open with forgiveness. Because His mercy does not run out, His compassion does not end, and His love never fails. The power of repentance is the bridge between human weakness and divine strength, a bridge that can carry anyone home. Darkness has a way of revealing what light often hides. It strips away illusion, silence, and comfort, forcing the soul to see what truly matters. The moment of darkness in the life of Hazrat Younas, was not just a physical descent into the belly of a whale. It was a spiritual awakening, a divine turning point that reshaped his heart, his mission, and his destiny. That moment became the symbol of how Allah turns despair into deliverance, pain into purpose, and isolation into revelation. When Hazrat Younas found himself swallowed by the great whale, it was as if the universe itself had closed upon him. The coldness of the ocean, the suffocating blackness, and the deafening silence pressed upon him from all sides. For the first time in his prophetic journey, there was no one to hear his voice, no one to comfort him, no way to escape. He had reached the end of human control, and that is where divine intervention begins. The darkness that surrounded him became the mirror of his soul, reflecting back every emotion. fear, regret, and realization. Every prophet experiences a moment of breaking, a moment where the weight of divine responsibility crushes human strength. For Younas, A.S., that moment came in the belly of the whale. He had left his people in disappointment, believing their hearts would never turn. But in the depths of that ocean, he learned that only Allah changes hearts, not human effort. It was not his mission to make them believe. It was his mission to obey the command and to trust the outcome to his Lord. The darkness taught him that divine purpose is not fulfilled by human haste, but by divine timing. That darkness was not punishment. It was preparation. It was a sacred pause between prophecy and fulfillment. When the world rejects you, Allah sometimes pulls you away to realign your soul. The whale was not a prison, it was a womb of rebirth. Inside it, Younas A.S. was transformed from a weary messenger into a surrendered servant. His words, ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen, echoed not only through the ocean, but through time itself. It was the cry of awakening, the acknowledgement that every trial has a purpose and every darkness carries a message. In that confined space, Younas A.S. discovered something greater than freedom. He discovered surrender. The ocean could not drown him because Allah had chosen him. The whale could not harm him because it was commanded to protect him. Even in the belly of despair, divine purpose was still at work. That is the mystery of faith. Sometimes what feels like the end is the very beginning of transformation. When you think you've been buried, you might actually have been planted, and from that darkness, new life begins to grow. For many believers, darkness is the greatest fear, the unknown, the unseen, the uncontrollable. But in truth, it is in darkness that Allah often speaks the loudest. The distractions of the world fade away, and the soul is left alone with its creator. Younas A.S. did not find Allah in the palace or in the crowd. He found him in the belly of a whale, where no one else could reach. It was there that divine intimacy was born. And when a servant truly connects with Allah in solitude, he emerges stronger than before, purified and ready to fulfill his purpose. When Allah released Younas A.S. from that darkness, it was not an act of rescue alone. It was a declaration that the lesson was complete. The man who entered that whale was a prophet carrying frustration, but the one who emerged carried enlightenment. He returned to his people, not with anger, but with compassion. He no longer saw rejection. He saw opportunity. He no longer questioned the delay. He trusted the plan. That transformation could only happen through darkness, because darkness refines what comfort cannot. This moment in Younas A.S. life is a message to every believer who feels trapped by failure, fear, or circumstance. You may feel swallowed by life, unable to see the way forward. But the same God who brought light to Younas in the belly of the whale can bring light to you in your darkest hour. The key is not to fight the darkness, but to find Allah within it. The ocean's depth was no barrier to divine mercy. No matter how deep you've fallen, His mercy can reach deeper still. The turning point for Younas A.S. was not when he was released. It was when he surrendered. The moment he stopped struggling and started remembering, the divine plan shifted. Because remembrance of Allah changes the atmosphere of any situation. What was once a chamber of despair became a sanctuary of worship. What was once a place of isolation became a place of revelation. That is the hidden wisdom of divine darkness. It teaches what light cannot. So when you find yourself surrounded by trials, remember the story of Hazrat Younas A.S. Remember that sometimes Allah leads you into darkness, not to destroy you, but to draw you closer. Every silence is a call to listen. Every isolation is an invitation to reflect. Every moment of despair is a doorway to discovery. The whale was not the end of Younas. It was the beginning of his awakening. From the depths of that sea came one of the most powerful lessons in all of human history, that Allah's mercy reaches even where human hope cannot. That even in your darkest moment, you are never alone. And that the light of faith, once ignited, can pierce through any darkness. Hazrat Younas A.S. emerged from that whale not as a broken man, but as a living miracle. Proof that when Allah writes your story, even the darkest chapter serves a divine purpose. Obedience is not merely following commands. It is the surrender of will to divine wisdom. It is trusting the command of Allah even when it defies reason, even when the path seems painful or unclear. The life of Hazrat Younas A.S. reveals one of the greatest truths of faith, that obedience learned after disobedience, a karyat that mere knowledge cannot produce. His story teaches us that disobedience brings storms, but obedience brings peace. And sometimes Allah allows the storm to teach the heart what comfort never could. When Hazrat Younas A.S. left his people, he did not intend rebellion. He was a prophet, a messenger of truth, a man of faith. His departure was not born out of disbelief, but out of frustration, out of the wariness of seeing hearts hardened to his message. He had called them day and night, in public and in private, but they refused to listen. So he left, not because he doubted Allah's power, but because his human patience reached its limit. Yet in the divine order, timing is everything. Allah had not yet permitted him to leave. For the command of a prophet must align perfectly with the will of the one who sent him. And so, what began as a step of exhaustion became the lesson of obedience that would echo through eternity. The storm that met him on the sea was not random. It was divine mercy disguised as correction. The wind roared, the waters rose, and the ship began to sink. The sailors drew lots to discover who had angered the heavens, and the name that emerged was Younas. In that moment, he did not resist, argue, or run. He accepted the will of Allah with quiet surrender. That was the beginning of his return to obedience. The first act of a heart that had begun to understand that no soul can escape divine authority. When he was cast into the sea and swallowed by the whale, obedience took on a new meaning. In the belly of that creature, in total darkness, Hazrat Younas A.S. had nothing left but submission. No control, no power, no plan, only remembrance. His prayer, La ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen was not a mere cry for rescue. It was the awakening of the obedient heart. It was his acknowledgement that even prophets can err, but the mercy of Allah can restore them when they return with sincerity. That is the beauty of divine love. Allah does not destroy those who falter. He disciplines them to make them stronger. Inside that wail, obedience was no longer about duty. It became about devotion. He no longer sought to serve God for success or approval, but simply because God was worthy of being obeyed. He learned that obedience is not about outcomes, but about alignment. It's about staying in the place where Allah commands you to be, even when that place is difficult. It's about trusting that His wisdom sees what your heart cannot. When Allah commanded the whale to release Younas, it was not just the end of a trial. It was the start of transformation. He emerged on the shore weak, frail, but spiritually reborn. The storm had washed away the traces of impatience, and the sea had polished his soul with humility. Now, when Allah commanded him to return to Nineveh, he did not hesitate. This time, obedience was not driven by obligation, but by love. He had seen what happens when a servant acts on his own will, and what happens when he waits for divine timing. The lesson was clear. Obedience brings elevation, while disobedience brings correction. When he returned to his people, something miraculous happened. The same hearts that once rejected him now softened. The same city that ignored his message now turned to repentance. Allah had prepared both the messenger and the message. The delay, the storm, the wail, and the darkness were all part of a greater design. To make Younas not just a prophet of words, but a prophet of transformation. His obedience became the key that unlocked a nation's salvation. This story is not only about a prophet. It's about every believer who struggles between surrender and self-will. How often do we, like Younas act out of frustration or haste? We make decisions before seeking divine permission. We walk away from challenges when patience is required. And then we face storms not of punishment, but of purification. Allah uses them to realign our hearts, to remind us that obedience is not slavery, it is safety. Every storm carries the voice of God whispering, "Come back to me." Obedience after disobedience carries a special strength. It is born out of awareness, humility, and love. A person who has tasted the consequences of disobedience understands the sweetness of obedience in a deeper way. They no longer follow commands out of fear, but out of understanding. Hazrat Younas emerged from his trial as a man of unwavering submission. He no longer questioned the wisdom of Allah's timing, because he had witnessed how every event, even the painful ones, served a divine purpose. True obedience is not blind, it is enlightened by faith. It is the trust that says, even when I do not understand, I will still follow. The story of Younas teaches that obedience is not about perfection. It is about direction. It's about continuously turning your heart back to Allah, no matter how far you've strayed. When he disobeyed, the sea swallowed him. When he obeyed, the sea carried him to safety. That is the difference one act of surrender can make. So, if you ever find yourself in a storm, remember Younas as. Remember that your obedience, even after failure, can become the door to divine mercy. The storm may shake you, but it will not break you if it leads you back to Allah. Because the one who sent the storm also commands the sea to calm. The lesson of obedience after disobedience is not a story of shame, it's a story of grace. It reminds us that no matter how far we drift, Allah's mercy is always near, waiting to guide us back to the peace that only obedience can bring. Redemption is the heartbeat of divine mercy. It is the assurance that no matter how far you fall, the door of return is never closed. The life of Hazrat Younas as. stands as one of the most powerful examples of this truth, that Allah never abandons a heart that seeks Him sincerely. His journey from despair to deliverance was not just a moment in history, it was a message for every generation, a reminder that divine mercy is greater than human mistakes. When Hazrat Younas as. was swallowed by the whale, his situation seemed hopeless. To the human eye, he was lost beneath layers of impossibility, trapped in darkness, surrounded by water, with no means of escape. But redemption is born where human power ends and divine mercy begins. Inside that darkness, he did not curse his fate or question his Lord. He turned inward and upward, realizing that the only way out was through sincere repentance. He cried out, La ilaha illa Anta, Subhanaka, inni kuntu minaz-zalimeen. That single prayer broke through the layers of darkness. The darkness of the whale, the darkness of the ocean, and the darkness of despair, and rose straight to the throne of mercy. Allah heard that call, because no cry from a sincere heart ever goes unheard. Redemption does not require perfection, it requires humility. Hazrat Younas as. greatest strength was not his status as a prophet, but his willingness to admit his mistake. That humility opened the floodgates of divine forgiveness. And when Allah commanded the whale to release him, it was as if the universe itself rejoiced at the return of a soul to its creator. The message here is eternal, that no sin is too great, no distance too far, and no failure too final for Allah's mercy. Human beings often give up on each other, but Allah never gives up on His servants. He forgives not because we are worthy, but because He is merciful. The same Allah who delivered Younas as. from the belly of the whale can deliver you from your own prisons. The prison of guilt, addiction, despair, or regret. The whale that swallowed him represents the mistakes that consume us. But just as the whale released him by the command of Allah, our burdens release us when we turn back in repentance. When Hazrat Younas as. returned to his people, he was not met with rejection. He was met with revival. The very nation he thought would never believe repented and turned to Allah. This was the completion of his redemption. Not only was he forgiven, but his mission was fulfilled in ways beyond his imagination. That is the beauty of divine mercy. Allah not only forgives, He restores. The story of Hazrat Younas as. is a timeless call to every soul. No matter what you've done or where you've been, the way back to Allah is always open. Redemption is not found in perfection, but in return. The ocean of His mercy is vast enough to wash away the weight of any sin. If Allah could forgive a prophet who fled in despair, He can forgive a sinner who kneels in sincerity. The message is clear. You are never beyond redemption, because His mercy is beyond measure.